Recording in progress.
I'm happy to
There's
hear that it's
Breeze,
being recorded.
Elaine, Kathy Green, Heidi.
Janet.
Wow.
Hi, Breeze
Good,
Honeycutt.
everyone. All right.
Yeah. Oh, look at this. My mother's joining us from Maine, from the spot that I was in last time.
Hello, LED.
LED's in
Hi
the
there.
house.
How are you?
Yes. Okay.
Good. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
I'm at my mom's house too.
Yeah. Yeah, look at Kathy. She's got wallpaper behind her today.
I'm in my childhood bedroom, perched on the bed, about ready to collapse.
Yeah. Kathy went through like her changes and her experiences in life. All the good, the bad, and the ugly happened in that room.
Oh, yeah.
It should be bronzed.
Yeah, we used to have like shelves up here with like little collections of ceramic owls.
Do you have stuffed animals in there too?
No, no stuffed animals, but there's a lot of books.
Like kids' books?
No. My dad was a photographer, so there's 22 boxes of slide carousels.
Oh, great.
It's great. All right, are you ready? I can let people in. I am.
All of a sudden I just forgot that there was a bunch of people here and I thought I was just talking with you.
Yeah.
It was like a kind of an out of body experience I had for a minute.
There you go.
Yeah.
We're letting everyone in.
I am. Yes.
And you can go ahead and start the theme song.
Well, everybody mute themselves. I can see who's not muted. If you could, because we have something fabulous coming. And I've got so many things happening here on my desktop for today's mega event. But are you guys ready? Well, here it is.
Well, it's the end of the week. Now where you been? Well, now it's Feedback Friday, so come on in. Come sit down and stare at your screen. We got a presenter that you never seen. We're Feedback Friday, we're on the loose. We'll be the train, you be the caboose. It's Feedback Friday with Kathy and Amy. Mashed potatoes and the gravy. It's Feedback Friday all day long. Feedback, feedback, Feedback Friday.
Oh, wow. Bob Ross is joining us today.
I saw that.
I saw that when I was.
Bob Ross is here. Yeah.
So now I don't need to be that calm because Bob Ross will be super calm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. How are you? It's Friday, and this is Amy. I'm turning the admits back to you. This is a Feedback Friday episode 64. 84. I was like, oh my goodness, 64. And thanks for joining us. Feedback Fridays, our weekly show where we speak with dyers, artists, scientists, activists, growers, scholars about our favorite topic, which is natural dyeing and color. I'm Kathy Hattori, president of Botanical Colors, and I'm having a childhood flashback because I am broadcasting from my childhood home. Although I did not have this wallpaper when I was a kid. After we left, my mom put it up. And Amy is joining me from Cape Cod. And we are going to bring to you an amazing program today with Claire Wellesley-Smith. Claire is an artist, researcher, and author based in West Yorkshire, UK, and specializes in projects that use local natural color created from homegrown and locally foraged plants. I just want you to know that I have a treadle sewing machine from Bradford, England, and that is where Claire is broadcasting from. So that's exciting. Claire will be talking about her practice and some of her community-based projects, including an ongoing stitch journal that is now into its 8th year, as well as recent work around textiles and resilience. Claire's town is a textile town and part of a textile region. And so she's been looking at the intersection of industry, making, and craft in that region. She also has a new book out called Resilient Stitch, Wellbeing and Connection in Textile Art that looks absolutely beautiful. So before we start, I just want to say thank you. We could not do this without you. We love the community. We've got a really great turnout today. It's going to be a fantastic presentation. Amy's going to be moderating and monitoring the chat on this call, which is where you'll post questions after the presentation. And we'll have everybody muted until it's time to open it up after we say hello and goodbye. And we also have an extended play Feedback Friday today. Today we have the fabulous Britt Bowles, founder of Sea-Spell Fiber and the super popular Indigo Pigment Extraction Methods group on Facebook. Britt will be sharing about her experiences growing indigo, making pigment, creating vats, etc., and answering all your indigo questions as part of our Indigo July. This call is being recorded, so we'll have a copy for you after the presentation, along with any other supporting information. So now, Claire, I'm going to turn it over to you, and welcome to Feedback Friday. We're so pleased to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. Here I am in, yes, it's 5 o'clock here in Bradford, West Yorkshire. And it's so nice to see so many people. It's really exciting. And so I think I'm going to talk a bit about, particularly about projects that I've done that involve colour. So some of that is connected to the place that I live, and a lot of that is connected to different communities that I work with. So if you just bear with me while I share my screen. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So I'm starting with an image of where I am. I'm starting where I am, which is at my kitchen table, and this is a photograph of me, and I'm stitching. I'm stitching with some madder dyed thread from plants that I grow at my allotment. And I suppose it's just one aspect of my practice, which I kind of like to see as a whole, which does involve colour and community, and it also is very much connected to the place that I'm based at. So this is a really good starting point for my practice. It's an image of a very urban scene. So Bradford is a city in the north of England. It's in Yorkshire. It's a part of a region that was very much connected to textile production all the way through the 18th and 19th century into the 20th century. It still has lots of textile production. And this is a photograph that I took on the way to a community project one day. And it was a community project that was exploring the history of a very large dye works that at the turn of the 20th century was the largest piece dye works in the world. So a really big operation that employed thousands of people. And I was driving to a community centre, and I looked out of my car window and I saw this plant, and it's obviously not supposed to be there. It's on the pavement, and it's absolutely flourishing, and it's a plant called weld. So this is a very traditional dye. It produces a really glorious, bright yellow colour when it's just about to flower. And it's in an area now that experiences really quite profound disadvantage. So that dyeing industry has gone, and the communities have really changed. But for me, it's I see it as a really kind of positive connecting image that links something that is flourishing, maybe not where it's supposed to be. It links the projects that I do that involve lots of different people from different backgrounds who have conversations through making and growing. So this is an image of Bradford taken in the early 1950s, just before something called the Clean Air Act, which would have stopped so much smoke coming out of the chimneys. And you can see a very industrial scene full of big mill chimneys. Bradford was a city that had a massive wool production industry. So it was a whole process with vertical mills that produced went from the raw fibre to the finished cloth. So and these mills and the kind of the architecture connected to that industry are still really visible in the communities that I work in. Some of them have been repurposed for kind of other use, housing in some cases, other types of businesses, sometimes galleries, art galleries, but they are, and some are in less of a great condition. So this is a piece of the central city area where the industrial buildings have really kind of fallen into decline. They're not so much in use, but everywhere you go, you see evidence of this industry. And there are still a lot of mills that produce fibre and produce cloth, but they now tend to be at the very high end of production, so very, very specialised. They send a lot of their production to the US. A lot of that is for kind of upholstery fabric, and then they keep some of it here in the UK where it's for kind of very expensive gentlemen's suiting and things like that, so for Savile Row and places like that. And so my work really kind of draws on this heritage. This is an image from a local mill that produced bobbins for the industry, and I'm really interested in how you can make connections between something that has kind of really changed over time. We're now very much a post-industrial society, and how you can have conversations that really talk about where people have come from and how they feel that they belong in a place. And I find textiles to be an amazing thing for having those conversations. So, this is my washing line a few years ago, and this is a indigo dyeing session, and I've been working with textiles for a number of years now, nearly 20. My kind of route into textile practice wasn't a traditional one, but one of the things that when I first tried indigo dyeing that I was really struck by was the transformation that occurs when you use this dye. And so at that stage in my kind of career, I'd started to do a lot of work in arts and health projects. So I was working with community organisations, in hospitals, in kind of patient care, and bringing creative practices into those settings so that people could use creativity as a kind of wellbeing tool. And I really like processes that have this kind of that transform underneath your kind of hands. So something really powerful about that, and watching that happen and being part of it. And so in 2010, I was offered a 3-year project that looked at using green spaces in what I've described, which is a very urban environment, green spaces to improve and work with groups of people who were experiencing mental health illness, and to use local gardens or gardening spaces to do creative activities. And I thought, well, this is the perfect opportunity for something that I've been thinking about for a while, and that was to start some gardening projects using dyes. And so I have to hold my hand up. I'm not a horticulturalist, I'm not a gardener, but I'm very interested in growing things. I'll try anything. And so we started a project called Out There, with a local charity called Hive, which works in the community around the city, and is really interested in people's well-being. And we started literally with this kind of collection of seeds, and we saw what we could do. So we borrowed a very small amount of space in a community allotment. We tried growing things that we'd never grown before. We had some spectacular failures. We had some successes. We literally had one garden bed at this stage, and every week a group of people met and walked up to this plot, and all weathers. We sat in the shed if it rained, and we started to grow things together. And we learned as we grew, really. And there was something really seasonal about that activity. Here in the north of England, we get very distinctive kind of seasons. In the autumn and the winter, we were able to kind of do work with the colours that we'd produced. In the summer and the spring, we were very much involved in kind of nurturing our plants, being on site and kind of learning as we went. Just a second. And so as part of this, we produced this whole wall of colour for a community arts festival, all from our very small plot. And it was a really amazing kind of experience, because a lot of the people that worked on this project had real kind of issues around social isolation, and they'd had some quite a negative experience of education. And we had this exhibition with this beautiful wall of colour, and I watched as our participants shared their stories, and they shared the kind of information about the dyes they'd used and the processes. And we talked to psychiatrists and all sorts of mental health professionals, and it was a really positive project. But as I was kind of standing in these places, in this small garden space, and looking around me, I'm surrounded by the architecture of an industry that's kind of, you know, a much smaller industry today. And I was thinking, there's something really missing from this, and it's the heritage stories. So we kind of proceeded really with some work with groups talking about people's heritage and their experience of dyeing in their own communities and in the places that they came from. And we started to look at the other things that are very available in this community, and that is amazing archive collections. And so we developed another project that still made this direct connection between people doing hands-on activity, taking part in community projects, getting to know each other, working together. But this time we did a project that embraced the heritage of our area and its heritage of dye production. So this is a dyer's notebook from the 1830s, which is part of a collection of the Society of Dyers and Colourists, who are an organisation who've been based here in the city since the 1880s. And they have an amazing collection of dyers' notebooks and recipe books. And so we were able to use this as source material for a project that that looked at stories from the dyeing industry through the 19th century into the 20th century. Everything from suffragettes who dyed a local reservoir purple as a protest, to this little notebook, which is a really great example of creative reuse. The dyer in question had a whole set of these almanacs from 1821 that he just kind of stitched his samples in and scrawled over the existing writing. So I just thought they were just fantastic objects, and they were really inspiring to our groups who really enjoyed working with archive collections, which usually are kind of locked away out of sight. You know, the public doesn't tend to engage with them. So it was brilliant to be able to access that stuff. And we also continued with our community gardens, but this time we set little ones up all over the city. So this is a piece of brownfield site, completely wasted space, and we borrowed it. We had some help from the youth justice team who came in and cleared it for us, and then we created a garden space with 46 different types of plants connected to textile production. And that was a garden that lasted 4 years, and then sadly we got evicted and they built something else. But we were able to do work with children and young people, schools. We produced all kinds of textiles as part of the project, and it really got people talking about, you know, the connections about where they came from, why they live in the city today. And a lot of the communities that live here today are here because of textiles. They've come to work in that industry over time, and so people have lots of stories to share. And we did a lot of kind of I'm very fond of talking about how we make and how we make together, and the sorts of conversations that you can have while sitting together and making. And so those conversations through making are usually the things that then lead me to my next project. And so I really like those sessions. They're really a positive thing for these communities. And this is a quilt that we made. So these were sample fabrics dyed all over the city in our little gardens, and we made a project called So, which looks better if you write it down. And this is it displayed on the wall of one of our gardens. And so this kind of connection between a heritage project and well-being has kind of carried on through my working life. I've currently been doing some work around kind of the idea of how we flourish, and so continue to use textile and colour as a way of talking about you know, how we feel and how making things helps us kind of function, and also how we engage with the environment that's around us. So this is a project, a recent project working with a South Asian women's group, where we used a garden space in a slightly different way. We used it as inspiration for traditional embroidery, and the women who were extremely skilled in that used their skills to kind of just do some real kind of place-based observation of a small community garden. And so it's nice to be able to pull these kind of themes of well-being and health and connect that to the heritage stories of an area. And so that's a kind of ongoing theme in my work, and features quite heavily in the things that I write about as well. So this is a extremely derelict looking space, but this is an example of another project, this time on the other side of the Pennines, which is a very kind of hilly region between Yorkshire and Lancashire. And Lancashire, the county, was the really the centre of the cotton industry in the 19th century, and so a whole a lot of similarities in terms of kind of textile production, but also lots of differences, because here we're very much wool focused, over there very much cotton. And so about 5 years ago I was approached by an arts commissioning body called Super Slow Way, who were interested in a building they'd come across, and this building in this image here is a tiny dye house that was built for a textile industrialist in the 1850s, and his name was Frederick Albert Gatty. So he was a man who'd come from France to work in the Lancashire industry to a place called Accrington, and so this is the remains of his little kind of personal dye house, which included a big dye vat and a well and a fireplace, and the bare bones of it are still there. And they wanted me to do a project that worked with the community and explored the kind of connections that this building kind of could bring. And so we were looking really at the story of Turkey Red, which is a particular process on cotton using madder. And this is one of the dyes that Mr. Gatty innovated with. He had a modification to that recipe, and so with a group of people quite a few of them were men, and they'd worked in the textile industry during their careers. So they had a whole kind of technical expertise around textiles that they brought to this project. And we worked with various spaces around this building, and we had a madder growing project. So we again used a community garden space, this time in a big polytunnel, and this is one of our participants with one of our madder plants. We were kind of separating them out at this stage to replant them. So we had kind of a 4-year growing project. We worked with our raw materials, and we kind of uncovered the histories of that community through a plant. So this image shows at the bottom some original turkey red from an old quilt, and then a skein of red silk that we dyed with the plants we grew in the project. And we were able to, again, look at archives and do research, and the participants were very keen on innovating using original recipes. So this one, this print was made by one of our participants. He made the print block himself using nails knocked into some wood, and we used a recipe that that we found in a dyer's notebook that included alum to make a paste. So these projects are not trying to kind of really replicate industrial processes, but what they're doing is they're giving people a taste of where things come from, and often those things are kind of seeds, from seeds right through to fabrics and processes. But because they're developed over time with people, there's a sense that the participants are really kind of leading that process. So they take kind of hold of the idea and then run with it. And so we were able to exhibit to the public. This is a whole wall of kind of archive information found by our participants that we showed as part of the British Textile Biennial in 2019. We turned Mr. Gatti's dye house into an installation with light and sound. With our participants, they did an audio of traditional madder recipes that people could listen to, and our visitors had to go into the dye house wearing hard hats because of slight concerns about the roof. We illuminated some bottles of madder roots that we grew in that garden space. So a really interesting project. And I think that one of the things that is really crucial when thinking about growing projects and thinking about how they work with communities is time. And I've been extremely lucky to have the types of funding that have allowed me to work with people over a long period of time. And so these projects and the stories that come from them and the heritage that we're looking at and the way that people respond to that and their personal health and well-being all come together through this process that happens over time. I'm really passionate about things being allowed enough space to really kind of develop. So alongside all this community-based stuff, I do have my own kind of practice, and unsurprisingly, a lot of that is connected to textiles and colour. So I like to work with often with found colour, found materials. And so this is an image from an exhibition connected to a project called Dyer's Field, which is something I developed over a couple of years, connected to a former dye works in the south of Bradford. And I had a walking route around the site, which is, the buildings are now gone, where I kind of collected plant material and used it, and I collected interesting objects that I kind of found on my journey. And the Bradford mills in the 19th century were very, had a big specialism in creating black dyes on cloth. And so these large pieces you can see in this image are industrial felt, which it's wool felt. It's made in a factory local to me here. It's a really absorbent fibre, and I suppose that, again, thinking about time and thinking about stories, I like the way that these pieces of cloth can kind of really absorb all of this stuff. They can absorb the stories, the colours, the kind of heritage of these places. That, you know, in kind of post-industrial places, this stuff quite often gets lost. These are just some small things that kind of I collected on these walks, bits of wood and scraps of discarded fabric, and they've been kind of interfered with the dye that was used mostly for blacks before synthetics were invented, which is logwood. And, you know, I'm very aware of the really kind of contentious history of that dye. And its kind of origins in the West Indies, and the types of kind of labour that was used to produce it. So there's a lot of kind of storytelling that goes on through these objects and these cloths. And more recently, I did a project that again took me out looking at former industrial sites around Yorkshire and Lancashire. I was doing a lot of work in different places, and as I was driving around, I was interested in the kind of plant life that comes to places that have been abandoned. So there are lots of former mill sites and places where mills have been, where we just have kind of this new growth springs up, and quite often you get things like weld producing really bright colours. And I was interested in the kind of rhythms that are kind of produced by industrial production, and what happens to places when that disappears. And in the north of England, you know, we do have communities that are presented with real inequality as a result of the loss of industry. And so there's those stories and the kind of thinking about what happens next to these places are really present in a lot of the community work that I do. So I'm kind of interested in trying to think as I make, and the stitching process for me is a really kind of a positive thing for how I think about my work and my community work. So I've got am I okay for time, Kathy? Yeah, okay. So back to Bradford, and this is an image of a pound shop, so a very cheap shop that is in a textile hall that was the site of a little project that I did connected to 3,000 women who in 1917, as a protest against the First World War, walked around the city. So they started here at this textile hall, and they walked with their banners and they protested about the kind of carnage that was going on in Europe. And they were women who were working class women. They were mill workers mostly, and they'd gone over to kind of having to do munitions work, and they were seeing the terrible loss that the war was creating. And so they walked around. This is a view of Bradford from the top of the town. They walked and they protested. And for the 100th anniversary of that walk, I did some work again, walking around that same route and picking up weeds in the street in places where plant life was coming back, and I kind of stitched as kind of marks of their resistance, really using that stitching process as a way to think about their journey and their activism. So I started with an image of my hands and my stitching here on my kitchen table. And I suppose my working life and my family life and my current research project. So I'm spending a lot of time at the moment writing up a PhD thesis with the Open University, which is very much connected to my community projects. So it doesn't leave me huge amounts of time to do kind of my own work. But for the last 8 years, I've had an ongoing project, an ongoing stitching project, where every day I try to do some hand stitching, and I use it as a kind of reflective exercise. So here it is. There's quite a lot of it now, 8 years worth. I use recycled linen. It started life as a curtain, and I like to work with threads that I dye myself. So I have a collection mostly from my own garden, which is an allotment. So I rent a bit of space down the road, and I grow my dye plants there. And this is a selection of colours that I produced last year while we were in lockdown here in the UK. So these are compost colours and colours from the plants that I grow. So I have this kind of personal connection to the colours and to the places where this colour comes from. And most of my stitching is very repetitive. I use a lot of running stitch, and I find that repetition is really helpful for thinking. So that could be that I'm thinking about work projects, about snags, things that are kind of not quite right, and try and kind of work through them while I'm stitching. It could be that I just kind of really just want to stitch, and then I find that it opens up enough kind of creative room in my head for me to have maybe new ideas or new ways of kind of problem solving. That's a view over my dye bed in my allotment, and so it's a really positive thing for me amongst the kind of busyness of life and work, to have this kind of textile that is a kind of companion. But I think particularly over the last 18 months, it's been a really helpful thing in terms of how I've kind of managed the real changes to my practice that have been caused by the COVID crisis. So that has obviously meant that the sorts of community projects I do, where people meet around a table and we share like that, have been almost impossible to do. So a lot of my work has moved online, and one of the great positives of that are things like this, where we can sit together and we're all over the world sometimes. It has brought that kind of international thing much closer. But there's also some real issues around how some people are just not digitally included. They don't have the skills, or they don't have the equipment or the broadband to actually access this stuff. So it has been a difficult time for people who have practices involving people. And I sat in those early stages of lockdown here in the UK last year, counting the days on my daily stitching, and trying to kind of work out what to do next. And one of the things that came out of that was some work with a group of women here online, so 30 local women who took part in a project where they stitched their feelings about social isolation caused by social distance and being kind of unable to see people, and they did that in these online sessions with a pack of materials that were sent to them in the post. And so I like to share about my daily stitching, because I think it's a really useful and positive thing amongst the busyness and the difficulties of everyday life. And so these are my 2 books. I've written 2 books for Batsford, who are a British publisher who have been around since the 1840s. So there's a long heritage of craft publishing that they have. A lot of textile books that some of you might have been aware of. They tend to kind of put a kind of fabric cover on, so they have a textile quality as well as being full of textiles. And I've been very lucky to work with artists from all around the world who've shared their work as part of these 2 books. And the themes really are around a lot of the stuff I've just been talking about, the kind of how we kind of connect through textiles, how we have conversations through them, and the kind of universality of them. We're all kind of surrounded by them all the time, and they are brilliant for kind of conversation starting and for sharing. And so those are the things that I like to focus on through my writing. And I have to credit lots and lots of people when I talk about my work. So these are some of the organisations who support it, and some of that is public money through Arts Council England and various other public organisations and smaller organisations who tend to host me to do their work. So that's me, really. I might have rattled through that a bit quickly, but thank you very much.
It was so lovely, Claire. Thank you. It was really nice. And so what are you up to next?
Well, next I've got another writing project.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't say much about that at the moment, but and then I've got to get my PhD thesis finished by the end of this year, really. So
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
So that's taking up quite a lot of time. And also, because we've not been able to do so many face-to-face projects, I suppose what it has done is given me a little bit of thinking time about, what aspect of, maybe a heritage story we might look at next, and see if we can build a new project around that. So these things take quite a lot of time to kind of develop, and to put the funding in place so that they can happen. So
Right. All right. I thank you very, very much. And I'm going to turn this over to Amy to moderate questions.
Yes. I like that people are still coming in. Thanks, Claire.
you.
It's so beautiful. I know we went through it Tuesday with you a little bit, but it's just like this kind of peaceful feeling over, I don't know, I could see Heidi shaking her head too. It's this peaceful feeling that you've given us. But so I'm going to jump into questions. Let's see. Did you get to replicate Gaddy's recipe for khaki?
No. We did, what we did do, which was really excellent fun, was we looked at, Mr. Gatty, who we saw the experiment shed, his kind of laboratory, was famous for a kind of alteration to a turkey red dye recipe. But then later in his career, he published patented a mineral khaki dye, which made him and his family a lot of money, and using iron salts and chromium. So we didn't try making it, but we read in some of our archive documents about some of the ways that army personnel, particularly in the tropics, had been trying to dye their white army uniforms, and that included through using mud, animal dung, tea, coffee, and ink. So we did tests with all of those things to see how we could get a kind of khaki result on cotton, which was quite messy and smelly, but we we did quite enjoy it, and that was again at the suggestion of one of our participants. So, you know, always try to oblige, but I didn't really fancy getting involved in using chromium salts in a community project.
No.
No.
Lots of questions about your the threads that you're using. So here's one. So how are you able to achieve a variegation on your hand dyed threads? Variegated thread.
Yeah, so by using so I've got a so I use a silk, so it's mostly a spun silk thread, and it comes on a cone, so I wind it off the cone into a big skein. I mordant it with alum, and then I wind it back into balls using a ball winder. And so that means I get these kind of balls like this, I suppose. If I don't completely wet them out before I put them in the dye, what I get is a quite patchy result. And I also really like to use my kind of exhausted dye baths. So the small quantities left after workshops and things like that. And that is how I kind of, so I like to stick them in the bottom of, you know, a vessel, soak up the remaining dye, and then usually that means that it doesn't absorb right to the core of the thread. So then I get this nice kind of variegation. So it's not it's not technically
not intentional, but
no, not necessarily. I like what I get. So yeah.
Okay, you answered 3 questions in that one about the thread. Let's see. Oh, looks like something just fell on the deck. Hope we, that was weird. Okay. Do the community projects, Mr. Gaddy's experimental dyeing shed, have an afterlife? Does something else happen after they finish?
Well, so in the case of that project, often here in the UK, projects kind of they tend to have a patchwork life. It's like a quilt. You start with one type of funding, you move to another, you kind of have to kind of piece these things together to keep them going. And so actually that project has just had another iteration. It's been looking at a centenary of a big gift that the Gatti family gave to the community there. And so that project, and I've been still working on it, has evolved into collecting oral history accounts from local people. So some of that is about, you know, the memories of it being a textile producing area. So things change, and also as somebody who comes from out of the area, I'm very keen to give the participants in the communities I work with the kind of the beginnings of starting things for themselves, so they take things on and move on with it. You know, it's their project, it's their heritage. So that is the kind of ultimate aim, that the participants kind of own that and take it on themselves.
Okay. Kate Godfrey is saying Slow Stitch is an inspiring book worth many, many openings. And I know Kathy's going to be ordering the books, because some of the other questions after this one is, where can I get the book? You can get I did put a link for Claire's site on there under writings. Claire, is that because I did it quick. Does it have a link that goes directly to your book?
Well, it's widely available. I used to sell it myself through my website, but the postage costs around the world now are just so prohibitive. I just don't feel it's ethically possible to do it at the moment. It's just ridiculous. To send to the US costs as much as the book costs. So I just think that's just not correct. And obviously I can't mimic a multinational company and do free postage, but it is available in it's widely available.
Yeah, lots of people, looks like they have it and they love your book, and they've got gotten it from different places, and yeah, any bookstore, but we'll have it too in our Botanical Colors bookstore.
Thank
See, Angela's asking, have you done a community-based project, excuse me, in the US yet?
No, always open to any suggestions. No, it'd be fascinating. I mean, I've had really interesting conversations with people who live in parts of the US with, you know, a really strong heritage of textile production, and those similarities about the communities that kind of what happens after the industry goes. You know, there's so much resonance between the stories from here in the north of England and those areas. And yeah, I'm sure it's something I'd be really interested in exploring actually at some point, looking at what's left behind actually.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, Sam. I am in Texas, so I know the growing conditions are different. What plants would you recommend to start a dyer's garden? Maybe kind of your favorite flowers.
Having had this long kind of working relationship with madder over the last few years, I really love madder, and one of the things about it here is that it's a hardy perennial. You can leave it out in the winter, it continues to survive and thrive. But the thing I like best about it is that when you dig up the roots and you kind of hold them up to the light, they have this kind of vibrancy. You can see that the colour is a living colour. I just find every time I see it, it just excites me. I really love that plant, despite its prickly kind of leaves and the fact that I'm allergic to it. Still love it. Yeah. But I think, you know, I always think that it's nice to be able to work with things that you've got around you. So, you know, I have a very small yard here, and I like to have plants that do lots of different things. So things, you know, that I can eat, but also use to dye with, things that are decorative, like Dyer's chamomile at the moment, which is just glorious. And it's beautiful to look at, and it makes a really strong, lovely yellow dye. So I like to find things that have got more than one use.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I love these two questions, and I'm trying to like make most use of time, so I'll be quiet. I'll just ask the question. I understand Yorkshire, in specific nearby Sheffield, to be the steel capital of the world. Have you been able to incorporate your area's steel history as a fun contrast to your beautiful soft textile presentations? I hear wool is stronger than steel.
So Sheffield in South Yorkshire, it's about an hour away from here, and I was involved in a project that did link the sort of craft histories of certain cities through, of all things, football, because the football teams in these areas often had nicknames. Their fans had nicknames which were around the type of production that went on in these cities. And so in Sheffield, that was steel. And obviously the textile industries around here also were very much connected to engineering industries. So the production of looms, the production of sewing machines, like Kathy described, her machine made in Bradford. And so there are some really strong links between the two. It's not something that I've been able to kind of do as a proper project, but certainly we're very aware of the links.
Okay. Let's see, Deanna, this is a great question or comment, I guess. This inspiring talk made me think about how much contributing to a community practice can positively impact our personal well-being. It's an important lesson. Thank you. Yeah, there's so many things that we can do within our communities, right? And do it in these kind of subtle ways with textiles and natural dyes to shout something, but in a less sort of confrontational way, I guess.
Well, yeah, and I often work with a framework that was kind of it's about 15 years old now, and it's called 5 Ways to Wellbeing. And these kind of 5 actions are kind of they tend to run through all my projects. But one of those actions is giving, and that can be your experience, your time, you know, your skill. And what I find in the projects is that, you know, I mean, yes, I facilitate, but the huge amount of work that goes on within the groups and how people share and work together, and that time that people give to the projects is a hugely positive thing, and it carries on long after the project ends.
Mhm. Let's see, how are the community projects funded? Are you applying for grants and initiating requests yourself?
So yeah, a mixture of the two, but yeah, they're mostly grant funded. So here in the UK, we have public money through things like lottery, and so a lot of the projects connected to heritage come from lottery money, and Arts Council England, who also support arts programmes, and then smaller trusts and charitable trusts and organisations with particular interest in the arts and how the arts can be a kind of tool for well-being and personal development, social cohesion. There's all that sort of stuff, and often there's a kind of patchwork of these things that goes into one project. And sometimes I'm commissioned to work on projects. Sometimes I write the whole project myself. So that includes applying for funding, which is a quite intense and lengthy process, and often doesn't work. You know, there's huge competition for this sort of for that sort of funding, and particularly, you know, we've just had 10 years of austerity in the UK, followed by, you know, the huge impact of COVID. So arts projects are kind of low on the list of kind of priorities. So this is a kind of constant ongoing thing. Where's the next project going to come from? So yeah.
Well, I think we're going to take this one last question here, and you don't have to, you might not have your 5 actions at the ready, but Angela's asking, what are your 5 actions?
Oh, well, okay, yeah. Well, the 5 actions are keep learning, take notice, be active, give, and connect. And I always do connect last. I like connections, and so, you know, I'm sitting here in my kitchen in Bradford. I've got this screen in front of me with all these people, you know, far away in most cases, and you know, it's been a real pleasure to be able to share some of my work with all of you today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we're going to go on to next things. First, gosh, that was such a beautiful and inspiring talk. Like I'm so drawn now. Heidi, I need to talk to you later, because like I'm trying to figure out how to start to learn how to re-embroider, which I haven't done since I was like 7. So I'll contact you offline. Anyway, I just want to remind you that it's our 11th birthday. We still have 11% off on the site for a few more days, right?
Yeah, I know. I was just going to get that exact day,
Yeah.
but I'd say through
And
Sunday at least.
yeah, so take advantage of that. And if you purchase up to where the free shipping threshold is, then you also get free shipping. So it can be a pretty good deal. And I just want to speak very quickly about next week. We are going to have Nienke Holgvit, who runs a design studio for material research and experimental and conceptual design in the Netherlands. And so she'll be joining us from the Netherlands. Nienke's connection to the ocean was the foundation of the research into seaweed dyes. And we were so fortunate to be able to get copies of her book, which is called Seaweed Research. And we just put it on the site, I think it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's been super popular. It's beautiful. And it just kind of sparks your imagination of what else is out there. She's also done work with fish skin. So up here, you know, we've got a lot of salmon fishing, and we're next to the Alaskan salmon fishing industry. And there's people that work with salmon skin as kind of a a fish-based leather, and she's done some work with that as well. So she's done this project called See Me, and her studio researches how seaweed can contribute to a more sustainable textile industry. And although the research is ongoing, the findings were published in books, which is the seaweed research, and also she has a book called Fish Leather. And we hope that you're able to get a copy of it. It's really stunning. And the second part of our Feedback Friday is Britt Bowles from Sea Spell Fiber. This is super exciting. Britt's up here in the Pacific Northwest. She's been growing indigo commercially, and she has tons of experience on all of these questions that people are peppering me with indigo, who I have 6 little pots of indigo. That's it. I am not a grower, so my experience is pretty limited, but Britt is here to fill in all of those gaps. So welcome, Britt.
Yeah. And yes.
Hi, Kathy and Amy.
Oh,
Thanks
There
there's
you are. Hi.
Hold on. Hey, Kathy, can you make Britt co-host?
Yes,
Okay.
doing that
I was
right
looking
now.
for you.
Here
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah. Britt
Hi,
is,
everyone.
yeah. Hold on. Maybe I'll just do a little spotlight on Britt. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, beautiful. Look at that.
So Britt is, yeah, like Kathy said, Britt is the indigo queen, but I like how you had called yourself, what was an indigo doula? Is that what it was? Indigo doula.
I like the term indigo doula. I really, I've been doulaed through my own indigo growing process, and in turn, I'm able to doula a lot of folks in their own practices. So yeah, it fits. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, speaking of indigo processes, when we're going to be having a community indigo dip in Seattle next month on August 22nd. And Britt is one of our volunteers. So it'll be Britt and Kathy and myself and Ellen Noble. And there's going to be a really great group of people who are kind of in charge of the vats. But anyways, I'm going to open up, I'm going to open up the chat first of all for people to ask you questions. And then I want you to, you know, you wanted to sort of kick things off with a specific topic. So I'll let you take it from there, and then I'll get you questions as they come in.
Sounds great. Thanks again for having me, Amy and Kathy, and thanks to Claire. I was really inspired, especially by that last little question about 5 actions, and I think it really applies to all art forms. It's a great cross-pollinating tool to use just in life, in art too. So thanks, Claire. Just to introduce myself, I am Britt Bowles. I live in the Pacific Northwest. Specifically, I live next to the Pacific Ocean in a small town called Gerhardt, which is the northwest coast of Oregon. This is the unceded territory of the Nehalem-Clatsop peoples. Very recently, last year, that tribe nation actually acquired some of the land back, which is very exciting. It's the estuary right behind me. It's a really important piece of land, so that's exciting. I say that because it's important for me to acknowledge the seed keepers, the global indigenous seed keepers, particularly for Persicaria tinctoria, which is the plant that I grow here. I grow about 5 different varieties, and I'm learning a lot about those varieties from many people in the Indigo Pigment Extraction Methods group, which is on Facebook. Anyone can join. And I'm also learning a lot from Takayuki Ishii of Owanoya. And so I really appreciate learning more about the origins of the seeds, of the varieties. There are about 10 different varieties of Persicaria tinctoria. So if you're online and you're looking at your plants and you're looking at someone else's plants, and they say, I'm growing Persicaria tinctoria, and you say, so am I, but my plants look so different, or my flower might be pink and yours is white, or the leaf shape is different, there is a lot of variance within the family of Persicaria tinctoria. So there's also a lot of variance in how they extract. So that's one of the things I want to talk a little bit about and encourage you to do as a grower. So first of all, if you're growing Persicaria tinctoria, and you're growing blue, congratulations. It's a huge, huge, huge investment. It's a big project. And hopefully that comes with a deep sense of gratitude for every drop of pigment that you have purchased from Botanical Colors, from their suppliers, right? It is just a nuanced experiential activity. And so it is very hard to share experience, but we try to do that in the Indigo Pigment Extraction Methods group. It's like a global group project, like a class project on indigo, where everyone is coming and sharing their experiences, not just with Persicaria tincturea, but all the other indigo bearing plants. So there's lots of families. So again, if you are growing for the first time in particular, you got blue and you're wondering, now what? And you have a relationship with it that's so tender and so intimate, and you nurtured the seed from March to April, to feeding it, to cutting it, to harvesting it multiple times. Now you have this precious, precious pigment, right? And you're like, I just want to stare at it for a while and just enjoy it, worship it. That's normal. But then eventually you want to work up the courage to use it, right? For most of us, our first experience with indigo pigment is buying it, probably from Botanical Colors or one of the other amazing suppliers out there, right? So we usually get it in powdered form. And usually, not always, but typically it's from an indigofera plant from overseas if you're in the US. So it looks different. It can behave different as well. And so that sometimes can be a little intimidating. I want you to think of it like a store-bought apple and a homegrown apple. Visually, they look very different. The aesthetic appeal of the store apple is purely aesthetic. You know, they throw away apples that don't look good because of their blemishes. And that's a shame because their function and their form and their taste is probably just fine. So first off, I want to say comparison is the thief of joy. So if you're looking at your pigment and you're thinking, my blue is not blue enough, or it's not dark enough, or it smells weird, or it has more green in it, or more purple in it than what I'm used to, it's okay. Your local blue is your local blue. Just enjoy that relationship. The other thing I want to say is, for most of us, when we're buying indigo pigment, it's coming in powdered form, which is actually not ideal for the dye vat. Ironically, we want to take dried powder, right, and actually rehydrate it and get it back to its original form, which you may not be able to see this very well, so I'll swatch it, is paste. And so this is paste from my plants that I literally just extracted. This week, I'm doing lots of different extractions. Like I said, I want to encourage you to experiment with isolating the different varieties. They have different timings for extraction. I'm experiencing that big time with one of my varieties. Some really need a little more heat than others. Also, if you're extracting cold water versus extracting heated, meaning you actually change the temperature of the water that you're extracting, in heat, you're getting different pigments in the plant. And so possibly more what they would call impurities, but not really, okay? Let's not judge it. So it's just different. So homegrown pigment is more rustic. It's more nuanced. It has maybe some bugs in it. I've definitely had some flies in there, you know? And it's just part of the natural process. This is not this sterile environment. I'm doing this outside and inside. The plants are coming right from the farm. I'm so grateful to partner with a farm called North Fork 53. They're a tea farm in Nehalem. I can't grow enough plants in my backyard. I live on a sand dune. So I'm able to grow in partnership with them about 7 to 8 rows a year of indigo in addition to other dye plants. I do work with a really great pal, Kara, a Vibrant Valley farm. She produces indigo pigment commercially. I'm really more of a small grower myself. I don't sell my pigment, but I do utilize it in workshops in partnership with my Indigo Fest partner, Iris Sullivan Dyer. So indigofest.org is our website. You can go there for resources, tools, etc. The biggest kind of maybe 5 things, let's call it 5, because we're on a theme. 5 things to remember about vatting your own homegrown pigment. So we already said don't compare, just enjoy it. The other thing is the 1-2-3 ratios can kind of throw us off when we get to dealing with wet paste. So that's one of the biggest questions that we actually talk about in the Indigo Pigment Extraction Methods group is all the recipes I see are 1-2-3 ratios for dry powder. How do I weigh my paste? How do I convert that? And what I want to say about that is first, get to know your own pigment and experiment on a small scale. And I'm talking really small. I'm talking quart-sized jar vats. Just do little 10-gram, 15-gram experiments and trial. You are going to have to be willing to experiment a little bit. And I know that can seem tender because you're like, I don't want to waste this pigment, but learning is never a waste, right? All of it is going into the library of experiential knowledge and living in your body for the future use, right? So what I like to do is I take some of my wet paste and I will measure out, say 10 grams, and then I will dry it just so I have my own comparison. So I have my wet paste dry that I can now weigh dry. And then that conversion of 10 grams wet paste equals, let's say, 4 grams of dried powder, right? So I'm creating my own guide for how to use my paste wet. The other thing I really want to stress is investing in a pH meter. pH meters are pretty affordable. Usually you can find them online. There's many different brands. There's not one really that I can recommend over another, but they're usually in the $50 to $80 range. Highly, highly consider investing in one. You're going to use it in extraction. You're going to use it during your vatting process. You're going to use it with other natural dyes. But the pH meter is going to allow you to get really precise. And pH strips, if you've worked with them before, they're a little finicky. They're a little hard to read. They expire. You need to keep them sealed in a packy, a little Ziploc baggie. And I always lose that bag. So I feel as though they're just a challenge to read. So a pH meter is your friend. This is going to allow you to get really specific with the amount of lime you're adding during extraction if you're using lime as a flocculant. But it's also going to help you when you go to vat that pigment and realize that your homegrown paste might actually already be alkaline, or most of the pigment that you buy, from Botanical Colors is probably going to test around pH neutral. So consider that and consider how much lime you're adding to your vat, right? So you might not need as much. Maybe you need more for one batch, and then your other batch, you need less. So it really is going to be unique and different every time you harvest and get a new batch of pigment, right? So use that pH meter tool. You probably don't need to add as much lime as the 1-2-3 ratios suggest. Usually I find it a bit heavy on the lime end. So, those are just suggestions to get you going and kind of get you in the zone for a happy reduced fat. One other thing that I want to mention is storage. So I talked about how I prefer to store it as paste. And the reason is it's already hydrated. It is ready to go into solution. I did a side-by-side test where I've added several different pigments, but my dry powder and my wet paste. And the vat that had paste went into reduction in less than 30 minutes. It was a really small vat, but very quickly. And this vat with the dry powder still reducing. It's not that it doesn't work. Of course, we know it does. It just takes longer. So the trick to working with dry powder, if you do have dry powder, which I have a lot of it, It's excellent for using for paint making, etc. So I always dry some. And the trick to rehydrating it, getting it back to paste form, is using a mortar and pestle. I've used the bottle with the rocks and shake, 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 right? But it really does work better. I had a class split up. Half the room got the mortar and pestle, the other half got a plastic bottle with marbles. The mortar and pestle vats were reduced and ready to use, and these over here were still reducing. So I really encourage you, store it as wet paste. I try to find a jar that it fits in exactly so that I don't have room between the lid. I don't want air between the lid and the pigment. Otherwise, a lot of bacteria will start to form in the form of mold. Mold is not necessarily bad. I'm talking to natural dyers. We've all experienced mold a couple or 200 times, right? Truthfully. And mold is not necessarily the end of the world. You can scrape it off. But if you store it in the fridge, you add a little bit of tea tree oil or clove oil and antimicrobial essential oil. You can kind of keep the bacteria at bay. Usually it's not in my fridge long enough for us to really store that long, but this is an example of stored paste in the fridge, drop or two of essential oil. That'll keep the bacteria from really accelerating. And then one other thing I just want to say is, yeah, really, really allow yourself to experiment and take notes. So when you're extracting, I was going to show you my little book right here. I like to keep track of the different years. First, I was drying it out as powder, and then I started storing it as paste. And I like to take notes. I like to talk about my over ferments. I like to talk about who harvested with me, what plants, if I separated my varietals or not. All that is going to just build, again, I call it your library of lived experience. You're going to be your best teacher on this. Hearing about someone else's experience with their pigment, there's so many factors that are at play. You're not going to have ever any two identical experiences, even within one season. So I really encourage you to play at a small scale level. Don't pour all of, if this is your first time vatting your pigment, you can do whatever you want, but I encourage you to not pour all of your pigment in one vat and get out your mother's heritage wool sweater. Just don't put that pressure on yourself, right? So play it small and easy and release that perfectionism of what it is supposed to look like, and play small and then build your confidence for bigger, precious facts, right? So that's my little pep talk to y'all.
Right.
And yeah, any questions?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of questions.
Okay,
I'm glad that lightning just started. Thunder and lightning just started. So if I disappear, Kathy,
okay.
once again. Okay, so let's see. I did an extraction last fall with my first Japanese indigo crop, and I was looking at the color and it's gray, not blue. Should it be blue?
Great question. So here's what I want to say about first extractions. Your first extraction is like your first time tying your shoes. It's like your first time, painting a picture. It's your first time. So be gentle and easy on yourself about your first time. A lot of people over ferment their first time and it's green, or they add a ton of lime on accident and it's more gray. So there's just so many nuanced things that can happen. I have green pigment, I have gray pigment, I have blue pigment. Sometimes it's an excess of that calcium hydroxide. So lime is a flocculant. It helps pigment get heavier and drop to the bottom. The more we add, the faster it'll drop. It's really a timing issue of how much patience do you have? Indigo pigment will settle on its own, but sometimes it can take a year. So usually we add that to help speed up the process. This is some pigment, you probably can't see it, maybe you can, that I did not add lime to, and you can still see it's still blue-green, has that endoxyl look to the water. There is some pigment settling, There's a ton of it still just floating around. So when I do my extractions, the other thing that I encourage people to do is not do one big batch, but separate it out into several small batches. Add lime to a pH of 9 to this one. Add lime to a pH of 9.5 to this one. Add lime to 10, 11. You get the idea, right? Create that library of experience for yourself so that next time you can go, aha, I really liked that, or I didn't like that, or, so hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's good. Like it's like a love affair that we're having with indigo, thanks to you now. Okay. I am growing indigo for the first time. I have 17 pots outside, 17.
Nice.
I was planning on waiting till the season ended to get as much as I could harvest, but the leaves on the bottom of the plants are starting to turn pale. I'm not sure why and what to do. Thank you for any advice. I have broadleaf indigo.
Cool, exciting. Lots of pots to play with. Another thing I really encourage everyone to do is play with their leaves all season long. So whether that be doing some fresh leaf experience, doing a lot of mini extractions, I really like the 1/2 gallon mason jars for stuffing with leaves, do a little mini extraction. Stuffing with leaves, do a bunch of those, right? Indigo Persicaria tinctoria is a harvest early and often plant. What that means is it's not a one harvest. I can usually get 3 to 4 harvests if I'm really on top of things from my plants in one season. So this is going to increase the amount of pigment that I can have. This is going to increase the amount of fresh play that I can do, right? So for me, I start seeds in March. I get them in the ground in April, May. I'm usually doing my first harvest at the beginning of July. I try to do another one about 4 to 6 weeks later, depending on how well the plant is growing. So don't wait. I actually waited to the very end of the season to do my first extraction the first year. And I didn't know this, but as the seed starts to tend to flowering, it actually starts to decrease the amount of indican production, and indican is the potential for blue pigment. That's what we want. So things that increase indican production are sun, nitrogen, a healthy plant. So all those 3 things in combination with the young leaves actually containing the most indican potential, which is surprising. You'd think, oh, the bigger the leaf, the more indigo I'm going to get. A quick tatakazome, a hammering kapazome style pattern can show you that indican potential in the leaf. I'm sorry, I don't have one handy, but I do on my Instagram show some small leaves versus some big leaves. So I would say harvest as much as you can.
All right, great. I want to start getting mine harvested because
Yeah.
it's my first time growing it too. And I do have those yellow leaves. I was waiting to hear what you were going to say about that. But Britt, you can't like clip the top of, you just leave it alone. Like you just want to like pull the leaves. It's like a basil plant, right? How you're kind of taking the leaves off of it.
So good question. You can pull the leaves off, and sometimes I will do that as I'm pinching the plant back because this plant grows quickly. The more you harvest it, the faster it grows, the more it will push out, the more the nodules will be encouraged to elbow out and make new shoots, which means more leaves. So it really loves being cut. And when I'm doing an extraction, I do cut down to about 2-ish inches above. I leave a couple nodules. So it's in the buckwheat knotweed family. You'll notice it has those little kind of nodule spines up the stem, right? And there's new growth off the bottom, and then old growth, and then new growth, and old growth, and then new. So you're kind of looking for this peak moment of lots of new, right? And that usually happens in July. I do try to time it with some sun because that's going to help me extract, but I'm cutting the whole plant. I do a cold extraction. That's just what I prefer and what I have easy access to. I'm usually doing it in a 100-gallon stock tank, a 35-gallon trash can, 5-gallon bucket, depending on how many plants I'm processing at the moment. So I am cutting back the entire plant, but the pigment is in the leaf, not the stem.
Okay. Okay, Deanna's asking, I'm looking for pointers to dyeing by starting with dried Japanese indigo leaves. I usually don't have time to use all my fresh indigo, but I don't grow enough to make Tsukumo. I think right, Tsukumo, yeah.
Great question. So if you were to harvest enough dried leaf kind of over several years, you might have enough to do composting. And I really highly recommend this book. It's called The Way of Indigo. This is Takayuki Ishii's book of Owanoya Studio in Tokushima, Japan. He does talk about small scale Tsukumo processing, but there is a way to directly vat your dried leaf. I'm not going to explain it here, but if you join the Indigo Pigment Extraction Methods group, Michelle Garcia posted a really nice instruction on dried leaf vatting.
Okay. Let's see, Martha, I follow you on Instagram. Beautiful posts, very inspiring. Had a successful extraction, but some got left too long. If the indigo leaves fully rot during initial soaking, how does that affect the extraction vat, pH, dye extraction, success, color of blue?
Yeah, there's so many factors, right? We're working with the elements. We're at the mercy of heat. We're at the mercy of water, whatever water source you have. We're really at, we're co-creating this indigo pigment with the elements. So we really have some say, but not all of the say. So we might be getting flavonoids, we might be getting chlorophyll, we might be getting some of the indirubin, depending on the temperatures that we have, the environment that we have. Generally speaking, over fermented pigment is going to need more grain because it's going to have more plant matter that broke down in it. I'll show you some here. So this is some nice blue pigment, and here's some over fermented. And it's very stinky, it's very smelly. I like to save it for, personally, I like to save it for paints and pastels and paint making. It's not that it couldn't be vatted, but the concentration of indigo tin is going to be lower.
Okay. Betsy would like to know, how do you store paste?
Yeah, so I think I talked about that a little bit earlier, but I like to find a jar that it fits in. So maybe that's several small jars, but I'm looking to store it wet, and I want to, I like to keep it in the fridge. You might not have to. I know some people who don't. Probably depends on your environment, but I put a couple of drops of essential oil, like a tea tree or clove, any antimicrobial essential oil, just to keep the bacteria from forming on the top. But basically, if you can find a jar or container where there is no air in between, so you're looking to fill it up to the lid, you can usually keep bacteria at bay. I have one here from 2018. I always leave a little. It's basically dehydrated itself now. It's just this little nice, cute little cake. But originally it was wet paste.
Okay, how long have you saved the paste?
Yeah, that's my oldest one. So 2018. Usually I use it. I'm using it, right? I don't typically have it left over for more than a year because I'm making a vat. But I always do like to keep just a little bit. And I encourage you to swatch some or keep the filters. The filter, if you're filtering with the coffee filter, they're just beautiful. Just so you kind of have a little memory of some of your paste each year, each season.
And also, can you freeze paste?
I have not frozen paste, so I can't speak to that. So I don't know why not, but try it and let me know.
You should join the group, Betsy. And
Yeah,
yeah. Let's see. I love when I go on Facebook and all of a sudden I get like, there are 3 new postings in the Indigo Pigment Extractions group. I'm like, what are they saying? It's fun. Okay, Isaac is asking, when do you know what are some signs that a vat has failed beyond resuscitation?
Oh, that's a great question. I would like to think it never, meaning there's always a way. occasionally there's a moment where it's more about me and what I'm doing, my timeline, and just what's going on in my life, where I have to stay to a vat, either go to sleep for now, maybe it's months, or a lot of people actually will strain their vat and then kind of re-extract the pigment from it by rinsing it. There's some great posts on that in the group. But what I want to say is there's some conversations that you can have, that you can get to know your vat on a daily basis, that will help it speak back to you. So those conversations that I always have, I always write the answers down in my vat book, which just has a bunch of samples in it. And it's just one page. And I ask it, what's your temperature? Are you warm enough, right? Are you hungry? Do you want to be fed? Have I died on you a lot? Have I put you through a lot, right? What's your pH? When's the last time I stirred you? How much have I dyed in you? So yesterday I did, 10 handkerchiefs. I'm going to make a note of that. I'm going to make a note of the smell. I'm going to make a note of the visuals. And you can make up whatever term you want. This is for you. This might not make sense to anybody else but me, but I'm going to take the time to develop all my senses, as many as possible, so that when I go to the vat again tomorrow or next week, realistically, maybe, I can ask it those same questions and then do a little test it. And I put it in here, whether or not it comes out white or gray or blue or purple. I'm going to make those notes for myself. So I would say that the biggest things are probably keeping the vat warm. That's the most difficult thing for people to do. And a tool I would recommend is a wand heater and an ink bird. Those two things in tandem are going to change your life. Trying to regulate heat over a propane stove, trying to regulate heat on a burner, just trying to regulate heat is really tricky. And most vats want to be kept warm. They want to be used. They want to be stirred daily, dipped in daily, and they want you to pay attention. So check the pH throughout the vat session. Add more reducer. So it's never just one thing. It's like a pet. It really wants like a really happy environment. And so I think as far as is a vat ever too far gone? I like to say no, it's never too far gone. There's always something that you can explore, something you can ask it. But heat is a big one.
And Britt can also be hired if you're about to think you're about to lose your mind and you want to have somebody help ground you. You can also get in touch with Britt Bowles for consulting. But hey, Kathy, I see your comment here that John Marshall also has a dry leaf method in his book, Singing the Blues. Do we still have that on the site? We do still have it. Okay, I was going to put a link to it. And
That is a must-have book.
Yeah, I just wrote down the Way of Indigo book too. Let me see. I think we have time for like one more question because
we will be carrying the Way of Indigo. It's just that because Japan's in lockdown, we can't get it shipped to us for another few weeks. And Taka's going to be a Feedback Friday guest, so we're excited about that.
That's the book.
Yeah,
that's the book. Right. Okay. Yeah. The third week of August. Taka is our presenter. Right. Okay. Let me see. Sorry, I went down on this too. I went a little too far. Let's see. Okay, people are leaving because they have to go to dinner. I have added a link twice now to Britt's Facebook group, so you can check that out in the chat. She's answered that one. Okay, one last question. Do you ever switch reducing agents mid-vat?
Yes, I have switched reducing agents mid-vat. Generally speaking, they're all what I like to call the whole fruit or sugar vat. So fructose, banana vat, mango, your old zucchini, salal old melon. There's a ton of things that can be used as complex fructose sugar reducers, pectin from orange peels. All of those translate really well with each other, meaning you can use them interchangeably to feed your vat. I typically won't do that with the iron vat. I won't mix iron and sugar. They have very different behaviors, but I think it's possible to do just like a Frankenstein vat where you pour everything in, you know, and mix it up. But yeah, I keep it in the food, fruit, fructose family myself.
All right. Well, thanks, Britt. As
Thanks,
part of
Amy
our
and
Indigo
Kathy.
July, you've been so awesome online, just like, you know, lots of really great videos and reels. You can go to Britt's Instagram page, which I still, nope, I did put it up there, but I will have all this, I will have all the links in the video post, which I have ready to go. I'm just waiting for us to end this recording, and I'm going to take this link. I'm going to plop it in there. I'm going to make it live so you guys can all go back. But I will add some of the things that you talked about that maybe people didn't get in the chat. But Kathy, do you have anything you wanted to add at all? I can't believe you stayed this entire time, Kathy.
Yeah, well, I'm hostage in my bedroom, so
Oh,
no. Britt, this was
No.
just amazing.
was
This was
great.
so good.
Thank you,
Somebody's
Kathy.
asking about Texas and growing indigo. I'm trying to get a web link for that. But
Okay.
yeah,
Thank
Britt,
you.
where are you in Oregon?
I'm in Gearhart, so I'm right between Astoria and Seaside on the coast.
Oh,
And you work with Iris.
I work with Iris. Iris is my co-founder of indigofest.org. Yes, we work closely together with events and teaching, and we're going to teach 130 elementary school students about fresh indigo in a couple of weeks.
I know Iris from many years ago.
put the Indigo Fest link in.
Yeah.
Right? Check that one out.
Excellent. All right. No, I don't have any more questions or comments. Let me just find that link. Oh, nice little top you're wearing there, Amy.
What? Oh, are you talking about the one that you bought for me? Sometimes I just want to see if maybe you notice. Do you notice me anymore, Kathy?
I do. You're looking beautiful.
Thank
I
you.
like the fact that that mud mask worked.
Yeah, I just had to really, I had to get ready for today. I mean, it's Friday. It's Feedback Friday, for God's sake. It's the only time
Maybe
I
you
ever
should do an indigo face mask next time.
Britt, it's not always about indigo, okay?
It's always about indigo.
I don't want my face to be blue like my fingernails are right now. Yeah.
With the dried leaf, it's actually really, it's wonderful. It won't make you blue. My friend Root Rise Apothecary, she has some lovely dried indigo face masks.
Oh, oh gosh. I did an indigo tattoo with a stick and poke. Good Lord, Sam. This is radical.
I love it.
All right. Well, thanks, Britt. Like
Thank
I said,
you
I'll
so
have
much.
links.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Super great Feedback Friday.
Thanks, Claire, for
Is Claire still with
being
us?
here
Thank
the
you,
whole time. Maybe
Claire.
Claire's stitching and having some. If you guys want to unmute and say hello and goodbye to
Yeah.
everybody, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
It was wonderful.
Thank you both.
Thank
Everything
you.
was wonderful. Very
Yeah.
inspiring.
Oh, hi,
Thank you,
Betsy.
Claire. Thank you, Britt.
Claire, Britt,
Betsy.
Kathy, Amy.
Thank
you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. It was great.
Fantastic. Oh, hi, Deanna.
Okay,
Hey,
bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
From St. Louis.
All right.
Martha's Vineyard. Ah, nice.
I'm in France.
France. Yay.
So
All
what
right.
do we do with all this inspiration from every Feedback Friday? It's like there's not enough time in a day to keep on.
Oh, just get busy. Just get busy.
Everybody get busy.
All right. I'm stopping the recording.
Stop. Okay, here it goes.
You have done.